All right, everybody, welcome back to the Carrot and the Stick. I am your favorite root vegetable, Garrett, joined here with your favorite pointy object, Keith. Keith, how's it going?
Very good, Garrett. How are you today?
Not too shabby. It's Friday.
Yeah, we're recording at the end of the week. This is our first end of the week recording, so we've got
Yeah.
a lot to cover today. Specifically, I think we want to hit one particular development on the Tau.com app that was really important for me to actually really, increase my usability aspect of the thing, and that's the introduction of MEVShield. Maybe you can kind of take us through the particulars there and what it means for people that are using the Tau.com app to enter subnets.
Absolutely. So for those of you who remember from a prior episode, we kind of talked about this concept of like, what is MEVShield and what does that mean? And it's here now on the Tau.com app. And to give a quick recap of that and what MEV even is, MEV, it's maximally extractable value. And what it really is people that will try to insert their transactions in creative ways around other people's buys and sells to try to take advantage of price action and extract value. So an example of this would be if they could see that someone is going to drop, 1,000 tau into a subnet. That's going to affect the price of that subnet. And if they knew that was happening, they could see that happening, then they could try to insert their transaction right before yours, take advantage of that increase in price, and then sell immediately after. And they try to usually do this within the same block, actually. So it's a lot of technical scripting and code and bots and everything that does this. It's usually not actual people that are doing this. It's bots. And so they can see things that are happening like, hey, this new transaction just showed up into the block. I'm going to try to insert a transaction with a higher priority than that and then sandwich it so that it's like you've got your transaction right before the target's transaction, and then you've got the one right after. And so right in the middle in that sandwich is the target. And we're seeing this a lot in a lot of ecosystems, and Bittensor is no exception here when it comes to alpha trading in dynamic tau. And the foundation introduced a feature called MEVShield, which allows for people to encrypt their transactions so that you can't see what's inside them. And it makes it a lot harder for people to try to play games with that. And it provides a lot of security, and it helps with the extraction of value being minimized by these bots. And that's a feature that is completely opt-in, and it's something that is a little bit technical to get going because you kind of have to wrap your transaction around this MEVShield, and we could talk about the specifics, but the important thing here is that the Tau.com app now officially supports this as default behavior. So every time you stake or unstake in the Tau.com app, that will be shielded with MEVShield. So that's just a new layer of kind of financial security, I should say. And it's really exciting to have that in the major tools in the ecosystem, and Tau.com is no exception. So check it out on Tau.com. And I think that's a good opportunity as well to talk about MEV in general and kind of what the state of that is. Because things have changed a little bit since last time we spoke about it. Last time we spoke, MEVShield was a pretty new concept, a new thing, and Bittensor moves really fast, and things have developed. And the MEVShield is a fantastic tool for us to combat these bots that are always trying to get ahead of everybody. But what they've done is when I say these MEV attackers or these people trying to optimize their transactions in a way to extract value, they have shifted gears a little bit, and they've used some really advanced tactics, and they've been forced to use these advanced tactics because of the benefits of the MEVShield. Previously, it was simple. You could see a transaction that was coming into the block, and as long as you could get your transaction one before and one after that block, you were home free, and you were just extracting value. It was like clockwork. It's not difficult at all. But now with MEVShield, these guys have to get a lot smarter. And so what are they doing? They're actually doing behavior analysis to try to determine what is inside an encrypted staking operation or a buy or a sell and try to guess what is in there and kind of what the amounts might be to try to get ahead of that. And it's pretty creative because they're combining behavioral analysis with using really creative ways to exploit priority. As I said earlier, that you want to sandwich uh, a target to take advantage of them. But in order to sandwich them, you have to have a transaction that precedes them. So how do you precede a transaction that you just found out about? Well, while the block is being formed, it hasn't been finalized yet, you can insert transactions that can have higher priority than other transactions. And this happened recently with EVM, or Ethereum Virtual Machine, which is like this layer that allows you to write Ethereum smart contracts that interact with the Bittensor chain. It's super cool. But there was a capability of EVM smart contracts to create transactions that had higher priority. And so they were able to do behavioral analysis to determine, hey, I think this is what's going on inside that MEV shielded transaction. And I'm going to use my smart contract to give me a higher priority to sandwich that. And that's how MEV has lived on. And so these guys are having to play a much smarter game. And so this is an ongoing campaign, an ongoing uh, uh, game of us versus them in a way, of like the people that are just trying to stake into and out of subnets and think of this as a real asset versus those who are just trying to skim whatever they can off the top. And so what the foundation has done is they've removed the ability for priority to be set with EVM smart contracts. And what they've also done is they are looking into any other way that a MEV attacker or an operator or a bot of MEV type activities uh, could use to sandwich other people. And so it's amazing what these MEV bots are doing nowadays. Is now they don't have EVM in their arsenal. They've got the MEVShield that they have to deal with, so now they have to do this behavioral analysis. And now they're trying to be very sneaky and creative by introducing like pseudo calls that have high priority and then inserting a transaction that has the same nonce as that pseudo call. And that's what's really interesting here is there's a couple of words that maybe we're not all familiar with here. There's pseudo calls, there's nonces, and a nonce is just a signature for a transaction. It's like a timestamp kind of. It's just an incremental number that's assigned to a extrinsic or an action. An extrinsic is just an action you do on chain. And so if you think of nonce just being kind of a unique identifier, what happens is people will submit these pseudo calls, which a pseudo call is a call that really can only be made by the triumvirate, which are the three keys that approve chain upgrades and are the governing agents of the Bittensor chain. And that call is going to fail if anyone other than a triumvirate key holder makes that call and gets approval by other triumvirate holders. And so these people are making these pseudo calls, which are bound to fail, but then they're inserting a new transaction that has the same unique identifier as said call. So what happens is we have a transaction call, which is just normal, that is inheriting the priority of the pseudo call because pseudo calls get high priority, and the pseudo call will fail. But then because they have the same nonce, that transaction will be in high priority as well, and that will go through. And so this is just this kind of creative way where you have these bots that are just taking advantage of these little intricate details in the chain. And the foundation is doing the Lord's work in solving this and plugging these holes. But this is the kind of game that is being played with these maximally extractive value bots. And it's fascinating to see. It's also really important that we tackle these. But it's a fascinating world we live in, and I think that the MEV-Shield has been proven to be a very impactful change in a positive way because it's forced the developers of these MEV bots to think way smarter. And now we're starting to see these really exotic strategies for how to sandwich in a large transaction, and it's just really interesting.
Yeah, and when we shore up all of the, potential exploits from the chain side that exist within this sort of like 12-second window of each block being processed, I can promise you whatever effort that these guys are putting in to exploit that will move fully into the behavioral aspect, because that will be the only point of sort of leverage that they have once the technical sort of like, holes are plugged. And this is already happening, like you said. I've seen it. I've seen a couple things, and I want to just share like how I've seen this be, you know, executed by these bots at this point. And it sometimes I think like, there's got to be a human watching this, but I think you got to remember, like, it's an artificial intelligence protocol with, hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of trades at this point. Like, people can build behavior based on your wallet without that much effort. And for many of the miners, this is their skill set. Depending on the subnet that they're operating in, they're already experts in this domain. And as you execute on your particular wallet, you're essentially feeding them with information. And if you've got, let's say you're using one of these particular tools to like buy every 5 minutes, and you're going to be buying a certain amount of tau. That they will find that transaction. If you do it twice, they will then zero in on the amount of time in between your buys. They will front run your third buy ahead of your block even, and then get out, right after your purchase. And then they'll just keep doing that. So even if you make your buys smaller and try to spread them out, a lot of times there's still a vulnerability there. If you have a wallet, for example, where, you think you're getting cute and you're buying all the macro cosmos subnets or all the covenant subnets in a single wallet, and you log on, you did it on Tuesday and today's Friday and the price is looking good, so you're coming on again, and you buy those subnets every time on that wallet. The second you execute your first transaction, even if there are no technical vulnerabilities, you have sort of like raised the flag is up, and the bots are aware that that wallet's active and that your next trade could be in that same subnet that you just purchased, or in one of the other subnets that you purchase in that wallet. And these type of things, I've seen them be deployed. You can sort of play the game, and it's like, well, how can you fight back? And it's like, how much time do you have is really the question. Like, if you have a subnet where you don't mind selling, you can kind of like try and execute a sale or a purchase or a swap, right? A buy, but maybe you can, on a certain wallet, but you can take the slippage threshold down, so that your purchase isn't going to go in. So like, let's say you have a 100 tau sitting on root, you unstake that. First of all, that action right there, boom, bots are watching that wallet. Like, as soon as you unstake a significant amount of tau from root, you are being monitored. Okay. And then when you let's say you try to stake that into a subnet, but you set your slippage low, so that isn't going to go through. Bots will still try and front run you because they see that transaction coming from a certain wallet, especially if you make a smaller buy on that subnet, a couple minutes before. And then you can actually sell, if you hold alpha on that subnet, like at the exact second that those bots come in to front run you. There's usually a block or two, sometimes more than a block or two. Sometimes they'll hold for 5 or 10 minutes or whatever, sometimes even longer than that, where then you can can artificially increase the subnet price using the bot and then get out on top of the bot. It's pretty hard. Like, I spent an afternoon one time just like trying to do it because I was so pissed when a couple of my buys got front run, that I'm like, I'm going to get these guys. The damage that you can do to them is like pretty small. And a lot of these bots have, quite a bit of tau at their disposal. I actually saw a transaction yesterday for 9 tau that was front run by 200 tau. So you're really seeing, like, even if you're not dealing with huge transactions, you're really seeing now, I feel like we've starved the bots a little bit, and they're now like scraping the bottom of the barrel, going after basically any transaction that they can, and they're leveraging up the amount of tau that they're willing to risk in order to do that sandwich operation. And even though they don't get as much out, the bigger they bet, the bigger they can get in ahead of you. If they feel like they've got an advantage there, they can really, take a few percentage points off of the amount of alpha that you've received. So one thing that I would suggest, if you're kind of new to Bittensor or even experienced and you're using, let's say, the tau.com app to do these swaps, jump on your favorite explorer and look at the transaction log. If you want to like see this in action, and open up whatever subnet you're trading, look at the trade that you'll see it pop up within normally like 30 to 60 seconds, and watch what happens. Like, see if your transaction is front run. Make sure your MEVShield is operating properly. Make sure that the amount of alpha that you receive in your wallet is what you were supposed to get when you looked at the ratio, looked at the price essentially, and you were given a quote by whatever app you're using as to how much you're supposed to get. And then go watch the transaction log and make sure it's legit. Because you might have this like idea like, oh, the fees are so high on this, or like, what, why am I not getting what I thought I was going to get on this swap? Well, it's probably not that. It's probably you've probably tipped these, these players off that are watching all these wallets, and they've found a vulnerability or found an exploit opportunity on your behavior aspect, that they're going to use to their advantage. And this will not go away. There's nothing that any app can do in order to basically hide this at this point, other than like encrypting all of the information going into the chain, right? Like, you can't actually hide the transactions that people are doing, because that stuff just that's what we have here, is an open visible chain where you can eventually see everything moving. So the behavioral information will always be available. Um, One thing that I've done is that if I've got a wallet that I know is particularly like hot with bots, I'll move some stake to a newer wallet and then maybe transfer it back to that original wallet if I really want to hold it there. I mean, you can just sit down for a second, think about what's happening with the bots, with the MEVShield, with the front running. Think about what the information that Garrett just gave you on the technical side, that I'm giving you on the behavioral side. If you can think it up as a vulnerability, I promise you someone else is ahead of you. And bring those into your analysis as to how you operate on Bittensor. Just make sure you're getting your money's worth on this stuff.
Amen. Amen. Keith, you mentioned a 9 tau transaction that was front run by 200 tau. Is that right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So I have a question here. We have MEVShield now, and MEVShield, it changes the game for the MEVers, and they now have to put in a lot more effort, whether it be compute or time or analysis or whatever, into understanding the behavior of these people that are trading. Do you think that those kinds of trades, where you're sandwiching relatively, you know, modest balances of tau, do you think that we're going to see a decrease in effort being applied to those, and they're going to prioritize these bigger ones? Or do you think that they're so hungry that they're going to go after anything they can?
The amount of tau that has been siphoned out of this network in the last 11, 10, 11 or 12 months. Yeah, 11. We're at 11 months basically right now, as far as how many months we've been
Yeah.
live in dynamic tau. I would guess if it's less than 10,000 tau a month, that would be good. So that would mean the total, like if it was under 100,000 tau siphoned out, I wouldn't be surprised if it was between like 50 and 100,000 tau. Like some of these days that we had, especially back when we were doing crazy stuff and running up towards like 2.4 on the sum of subnets. Like some of these days where subnets were doubling or tripling in price, the bots were just like having a field day in there. And you would sort of know as you're going in, you're like, I know I'm going to get front run here. I'm watching the one major bot that goes after this subnet. Okay, they just got out. Okay, I know I'm losing a little bit. I can see the few bots that got in before me, but the big one isn't in right now. I'm going to try and get ahead of that one. So there was so much like blood in the chum in the water. These things got, fat and happy for a very long time. And I don't think that they're ready to give up on that income. Like, there's no
Mm,
easier way to make it, really, in
yeah.
Bittensor than that. So I expect it to get more and more aggressive. And I do think that there'll be some sort of like somebody's probably going to get really intelligent with their anti and not just use anti-MEV, but try and exploit those bigger buys. And I think that you'll see bots going after you already see kind of bot on bot attacks now, but you'll see that I think go to a higher level. And that's why they never went up to those larger tau amounts before, is because there's risk associated with it. As far as like front running smaller trades with front running a single digit trade with a 3-digit trade, like that's why you didn't see that before, because they also like they're setting this thing up and then walking away from the computer for however long, days, weeks. I don't know how closely it's monitored. Hours for sure. They're not watching it. Whoever's created these things. So there's plenty of opportunity for like, to return fire. But the people that know how to do that are normally like you, they're just like good guys, and they're just not going to like spend their time trying to figure out how to do that. They're going to try to shore things up and make things better for everybody, rather than like be the Robin Hood and come in and try to like steal from the bots. But I'm looking forward to like if someone can figure that out, it's going to be one of the bots anyway that figures out how to do it. So it probably is never going to be shared on this podcast. But I hope we see it on chain. Like I would be cheering for it. Like if I saw a 200 tau buy that got like somehow sandwiched by 1,000 tau like savior, like that would be cool for me to watch on the chain. But hopefully we get all this stuff figured out enough, and everybody sort of minds their behavioral P's and Q's, and it ends up being a moot point as far as damage to your average tau holder.
Yeah. I think most people will not be going after these MEV bots so much as they really want to defend themselves from the MEV bots.
Yeah.
And we might see some heroes that really do go after those bots, and I agree, that'd be fantastic to see. What can people do to protect themselves against these MEV bots, aside from transacting via the Tau.com app with the MEVShield?
I'll give you a couple things. Like if you're going to sell alpha, I don't sell a lot of alpha, but I have done some tax loss harvesting. So tax loss harvesting basically means you're selling chunks of alpha and then you're going to try and buy it back later because you don't want to lose your position, but you do want to use this sale advantageously for, to report it to the man at the end of the year. And what I've noticed is if you're selling and you want to sell like a big chunk of alpha, sell a couple of like small chunks. The bots will wake up, leave the subnet, because there's always some bot kind of holding and waiting for some poor sap. And then if you wait a few minutes and then if you spread it out over like 10 transactions, then you do like 3 or 4, you stop for 5 or 10 minutes, watch the transaction log. You can see the bots come back in, then sell again, do the same thing. Remember, they aren't human controlled. So you're able to like, there's some sort of threshold where if you sell, they get out, they wait, they'll come back in. If you can figure that out and it's worth your time, if you're moving enough tau to watch that type of thing, that's one of the options you can do. Like I said before, if you move tau into a new wallet and if you got a subnet where all you hold is one certain, or you got a wallet where all you hold is one specific subnet, just be smart about how you're trading. Like if you've let the wallet sit for a few days and you want to do one trade, you don't have to really worry about it. If you come in and you do your normal, like, I'm going to set this up to run for 12 hours and buy, 1 tau every hour or something, you're opening yourself up to exploitation. So like if you can think of like, just think about what it looks like on the chain. If it looks like a pattern, it's a problem, you know? And that's really the name of the game. There's 100 different things and scenarios people are doing and buying and selling and transferring and doing the whole dance. So I can't go into all the scenarios, but if you're in Bittensor, you're most likely smart enough to understand how what you're doing looks like to everybody else. So like always keep that in mind as you're doing it. And then if you can think of a way to exploit yourself or just watch the transaction log, you'll see if you're getting sold on right after you buy in, even if it's for a tower or two.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you brought up that point of if you only have one or two subnets, be careful. I think that's a huge point here is that when it comes to behavioral analysis, I mean, these MEV bots, they will not be able to see what your transaction is inside the MEV shield. No matter what happens, they cannot directly see inside that. But they're not going to be idiots. And if you only have one one token and you've only ever held one alpha token, they're probably going to guess at what you're going to be buying or selling next. And I think the advice of just being as unpredictable as possible is one of the best defense tactics that we have against uh, these kinds of bots. And as we progress forward, the MEV-Shield will get stronger and we'll have more of these like strategies and avenues that get cut off at the knees by really just improvements to the blockchain itself. But until then, guys, be as unpredictable as possible when it comes to transacting.
Yeah, and one more thing that I would recommend is if you're trading on like a cold subnet, a subnet that's not getting a lot of attention, selling or buying. Basically, a subnet that's just sort of been like maintaining its price. It's not on the top 3 or top 5 on whatever explorer you're using. You're probably fine. Like there's probably not something lurking in there waiting to get you. And if you use the MEV-Shield, I think you're okay. If you're getting involved in a subnet that either has a lot of news coming up, recently, like maybe they've announced some chairperson or they've, got some new release or the front end just came out or they've got whatever it is, and the price is pumping, or even if the price isn't pumping, but you're just seeing it just move up incrementally. And this is why it matters for everybody, not just for people with a lot of tau, because people that are listening to this might be thinking like, well, I'm just trading a small amount of tau, so it doesn't matter. No, your entry price is still totally impacted by these guys that are getting ahead of you. So the behavioral analysis extends beyond just your own individual wallets, and it looks at the momentum of the entire cohort of people that are into and out of that subnet. So if you're getting involved in something that looks a little bit hot, I would suggest looking at the trades that are happening recently, and they've gotten smarter about this, bots have, because it used to be they would just buy in one larger amount, like 50 tau, 100 tau, 500 tau, whatever. Now I see bots that buy, in 3 or 4 tau transactions, but they do it 50 times or 20 times or whatever. So they try to get underneath the threshold. So if you're trying to look at the transaction log for a subnet to see if bots are waiting in there, basically trying to ride on this momentum of the subnet moving up, you need to, change your view from like 10 to 100, put your filter on buy, so you can see the anything above like really 5 tau or even 1 tau, and then you want to just scroll through and click on a couple of those larger buys and see what kind of wallet it is. Like if it's a wallet that, and then you can look at the transactions on that wallet, and if it's holding everything for a day or 2 days or 2 minutes or whatever it is, like you'll figure out quickly if there's a few hundred or a few thousand tau sitting in the hands of somebody that when this momentum runs out is going to tank the price of that subnet. So this is what I always do, whether I'm trading a large amount or a small amount, is that I take a look at the transaction log for kind of just the last maybe not even 24 hours, but I just look at the last couple hundred transactions and try and figure out if the thing is sort of got some landmines in it that are going to cause a problem with my entry price, not necessarily by a sandwich, but by an exit after the subnet cools off a little bit.
Well said, well said. Well, you heard it here, guys. But let's switch gears from this MEV stuff to burning. We talked about sandwiches in the previous segment. Well, let's talk about burning said sandwich. Just kidding. But let's talk about alpha burning. and talk about what that means and the different ways that people go about it and what people are doing right now in this ecosystem. Like, what is the trend and is that good or bad? So let's introduce this concept of burning alpha. What does that even mean and why would anybody do that? Well, there's a couple different flavors of this. The first is the ability to just take alpha that you possess and to just like basically light it on fire and get rid of it. And some people might ask, like, well, why would you ever do that? That's like taking your wallet and throwing it in the dumpster fire. Uh, well, yes, it is like that. But when you throw your wallet in the dumpster fire, there is now less dollars in circulation, which might be beneficial depending on what you want to do with that alpha. And we're starting to see that with subnet owners that are purposefully burning alpha so as to make the inflationary effect of the alpha emissions lessened. And so that's something we're seeing right now in the ecosystem. Another flavor of this is basically buying alpha and then burning that. So not just the alpha emissions that have been accrued naturally, because all of the subnet owners get 18% of the outgoing alpha emissions, but subnet owners might even use revenue they're gaining from whatever product they're developing for the subnet, and they'll use that to buy alpha and then burn it, which will have a positive impact on price and can help support the price and also reduce inflation in the subnet. And there's another flavor of burning, which is a little bit different, which is miner burn. And this is where the validators will actually decide, hey, I don't think the miners really should be getting rewarded here for whatever reason. And they will vote to burn the miners' alpha emissions, either in part or in whole. And some subnets have 100% burn and some subnets have partial burn. And some of this is done in collaboration with the subnet owner, and some of this is done against the will of the subnet owner. It really depends. But this is a tool that the validators have been using in a form of subnet governance, which basically helps put a little bit of a value on the rewards that the alpha is paying for. And so if you were to look at a subnet, you would say, hey, there's good work being done here, but it's not worth all of that alpha. Maybe it's worth 50% of that alpha. Well, the validators can vote to burn 50% of the alpha. And what does that burn do? Well, that will recycle it so that those alphas can get reused at a different time, which lowers the inflationary effect of alpha as well. And it also reduces sell pressure because miners usually will sell their alpha positions more likely than other parties because they are not holding alpha as an investment necessarily. They are being paid alpha and they got to pay bills. They got to live life. This is their job. And so they're going to sell down alpha for tau and then sell down tau for fiat currency to pay the bills. And if the miners are making less alpha, then the natural sell pressure of just paying the bills is going to go down. And that can be a positive effect to the price of the subnet. And so sometimes that's done strategically. Sometimes that's just done because maybe the miners have figured out an exploit of some kind, and the subnet doesn't really want to pay them for that anymore. So those are the different flavors of burning. There's different reasons to do different ones. We're seeing that all over the place, actually. It's like burning in 2025 has become really popular. I know we've mentioned that in the past on this podcast, talking about miner burn as being one of the big introduced features of 2025 post DTAU. And it's just been baked into the normal part of life right now. And I think this is a good topic to talk about because this will affect both the current state of things and also into the future of like what should we be encouraging subnets to do and what is the right version of burn and is this an ideal state? So Keith, fire away.
Yeah, the reason that I wanted to talk about this is because I was kind of scrolling through some of the subnets recently and noticed the massive amount that has been burned by some subnets. And like you said, there's different ways that this is happening. Um, I think we can sort of set aside the involuntary burn, which is the validators coming together and deciding that, a certain subnet is adding absolutely zero value or adding negative value to the ecosystem and its holders. And they all decide to essentially burn minor emissions via code that they implement, right? And they all run the same code. And then that essentially neuters the subnet as far as the alpha emissions are concerned on the mining side. Okay, so we'll kind of set that aside. But then if you go look at like the subnets that many of us all know and love, there's quite a bit of burning going on. So like on first 64 subnets, the subnets that launched, when we went live in February last year, some of the larger players that have burnt the most amount of alpha are like Liam, for example. So total alpha issued up to this point, 4.18 million. They've actually burned 660,000 alpha. So that's what, about 12% or something of the supply, or actually a little bit more than that. So it's 3.52 million circulating instead of the 4.18 that was issued. Just like everybody knows from, Econ 101 or whatever, as you reduce the amount of available, widgets, then if the demand for the widget stays the same, then the price is supposed to go up or whatever. So this is what people are essentially trying to do. If you have less of a thing, but the demand for the thing isn't impacted when you burn it, or maybe demand even goes up because people see you reducing the amount of the thing that they all want, it can create this sort of mechanism, this the infamous flywheel, that the crypto flywheel that we're all searching for, kind of like El Dorado or something. So that's what these subnets are trying to do. Just to give you like a couple more examples, Shoots has burned over 100,000 alpha. Ridges has burned over 100,000 alpha. Vanta has burned over 200,000 alpha. Templar has burned over 300,000 alpha. Some of these subnets also have, in addition to like just maybe the thing everyone's kind of heard of, which is like buy back and burn. So they take the revenue and buy the alpha off the market and then burn it. They have mechanisms sort of built into their incentive structure where they only pay the miners in the amount of alpha based upon like the utilization of the subnet. Or like I know Score does this, I know Hippias does this, but miners have gotten very intelligent with the halving that happened. And even pre-halving, the seeds for this were sort of laid with different ways to keep from sort of overpaying on the mining side when maybe they're not utilizing that full capacity. So that's one of the other things being implemented. I think from a value standpoint, as someone, if you're really interested in a subnet and you're doing your research on it, like click into these things, try and figure it out. It's pretty easy on Tau stats to do it. Once you click into the subnet, you can see the total amount issued. You can see the total amount burned. I mean, one of the monsters on here is Hone. Hone has 4.06 million alpha issued, and they've burned 750,000. So that's like approaching like 20% or something. That's a huge burn. And these subnets also, when they have these burns going, typically you're receiving a little bit of a higher APY. So you do want to look at that as well, and just factor all of these things into your decisions for subnets. Now, one question that I had, and you were kind enough to take me into the chain code before this call to show me what's up with that, but I don't know if we need to do that here or not. The difference between recycle and burn, because I always get corrected when I say burn. It's like when I'm talking about Tau and subnet registrations or whatever, it's like, oh, Keith, it's not burn, it's recycle. And that means that instead of, lighting that money on fire and it disappears forever, it gets added to sort of the end of the token distribution cycle, right? So you
Yep.
in the Tau case, you still end up at 21 million after all the different things that we've done, whether it's, you know, burning miner registration costs or burning subnet registration costs or burning the cost to like name your key or provide details to your key on the chain. But what's happening on the alpha side on most of these subnets? Like we looked at an example, I think we looked at Shoots. Shoots was actually burning, right? So that reduced the amount of alpha that Shoots is going to have in circulation at the end of the day by whatever their burn was. Um,
Right.
is there any easy way for anybody to determine like what is the total supply on this subnet and how are subnet owners executing burns versus recycling? Because they have both available, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit of background on like recycle versus burn. First of all, every alpha token has a cap of 21 million total that could ever be in circulation ever. And that's the max that could ever be emitted in total, which is the same as Bitcoin. It's the same as Tau. And there's also a halving schedule. And alpha is actually produced at a higher rate than tau is. So alpha will approach its halving faster than tau does. And
Roughly
so
2x, right?
roughly 2x,
So
yes.
2 years instead of 4.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And so with this cap in mind, there are a couple of these different mechanisms of, let's say I do want to remove alpha from circulation so that I can have a better price, lower inflation, etc. If I choose to recycle, then the alpha will get removed from my wallet and it will go to nobody, but it will be put in front of the emissions scheme so that instead of minting a new alpha token, it will just pluck from one of the to be recycled alpha tokens. So it goes into this like recycle bin. And let's say that there's 500 alpha in the recycle bin. Well, over the next however many blocks, instead of minting new alpha, it'll just draw from that recycle bin and start inserting that alpha back into the system for recirculation. And then once it's out of that 500 alpha, then it'll start minting new alpha. So
Mm.
what does that do? That actually delays the halvening for that alpha token.
This is what we
And
saw with Tau last year, right? Where it kept
right,
getting pushed out until eventually it ended up on December 11th or 12th or whatever it was.
right.
But if you went back like a year before that, it was like projected to happen in October or something, you know?
Exactly. And so the exact moment that a halvening will happen is oftentimes difficult to predict because you don't know exactly how much recycling is going to happen.
Right.
Now, a burn is different than a recycle in that it still gets removed from your account or your wallet if you decide to burn, but it goes to nobody, nowhere, and it doesn't get recycled at all. It doesn't go back into that queue of emissions. It goes to the ether and it's never recovered ever again, but the total issuance doesn't go down. It stays the same. So if there's 1 million alpha tokens that are issued and you burn 100,000 of them, well, now there's 900,000 alpha that is in circulation, but it's still 1 million that's been issued. And so you still only have 20 million that's remaining. Whereas recycling, you aren't decreasing the amount total that will be created because it's just getting recycled. It's just going to get added back into the queue. But if you burn, if you have a 21 million cap, and let's say that however many years down the road, every single alpha has been minted by that point, you will not have 21 million. You will
Mm.
have 21 million minus the amount that has been burned. And so if you burned 100,000, you will have, 20.9 thousand or 20 million
Right.
tokens.
So this is why subnet owners have probably chosen burn instead of recycle because it has the like biggest bang for the operation as far as their token holders are concerned because their token holders want to see less alpha available. Their alpha holders hypothetical. I mean, there's a whole school of thought as to like what should be done with that money. Should you be buying back and burning? Maybe we can get into that, or should you be taking that money and putting it towards your protocol, hiring your next engineer, whatever, paying your miners a little bit more. There's a lot of different things. Doing some more marketing. But they've chosen, a lot of the subnets have chosen to do this burn strategy in order to kind of entice investment. And as top subnets continue to do this, especially kind of the top 20, I think people look at as, sort of like leaders, thought leaders, and implementation leaders. Especially certain teams are very early on adopting different things in Bittensor and taking some of these strategies to the extreme. When those subnets do it and they're successful, you can expect other subnets to sort of follow suit.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And as far as which one you'd want to use, burn versus recycle, it really depends on what your goals are. Like, are you just trying to support the current price and potentially even delay the halvening? Then recycle is going to be your best bet. But if you want to have a deflationary effect, especially a permanent deflationary effect on your token, then a full burn is what you want to do. But a full burn is permanent, so it is it's a bit spicy. But
Yeah, I
that's
think
what we're
some
seeing right now.
owners. Sorry, what were you going to say?
No, go ahead.
I was just going to mention, I think the subnet owners are less concerned about like the sanctity of the 21 million. That's why the Bittensor Tau strategy was always to do a recycle so that we could maintain the 21 million eventually in circulation. But from a subnet owner perspective, I don't think they're as worried about, the hard 21 in circulation. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, certainly no one wants to see it exceed 21 million.
Right.
That should be a hard ceiling. But going beneath that, I think that definitely is open for debate. And what we're seeing right now, just through the chain data, is that a lot of subnet owners are choosing burn over recycle.
And the burn has absolutely no impact on the token release schedule, right? Whereas the
Exactly.
recycle does.
Yeah, the burn is very simple. It's decrease stake on a hotkey and then do nothing else. So it doesn't affect total issuance. It doesn't affect the recycling or anything. It doesn't do any of that. And recycling does do that. It's saying, hey, actually, take the alpha that this hotkey has and use that to decrement the total amount of basically like alpha that's already out in circulation. And therefore, you're preserving the 21 million. It just gets put in essentially, but it gets put into the queue for recycling.
This is a related topic. So when subnet owners choose to not allocate the full 41% of their alpha out to miners, that's not a burn, right? That's just instead of allocating 41%, we're only, are we burning actually? Are we recycling 50% of the alpha in that case? Or is it just like not being minted? I guess it is.
Oh no, it's being minted, but then immediately recycled, and so it's like effectively not minted. But that's what's happening. Is that what they'll do? Is if a subnet owner is like, hey, I really only want to, like, maybe this is phase one of or whatever of my project, and I only want to release 50% of the funds for some reason. Okay, so you tell the validators to put 50% of the weight on net or on UID 0, which is a fake miner slot that represents nobody essentially. I mean, it's owned by the owner, the subnet owner, so it is a real UID slot, like a miner slot in the subnet, but weights that are assigned to that just go into the recycle bin. So that's what would happen if there was a subnet that was like, hey, I only want to release 50%. You can't really say, let's not emit today or something like that. You would just be burning, and those emissions then get recycled. Yeah.
And I'm not as involved on the validator side anymore, but do validators, they have to play ball then? Like if the validators don't put the 50% on UID 0 and you have your top validators that are like wanting to rebel and pay the miners in full? Like, what happens to that? Is that I
It's,
thought
it's
I didn't know that that's how it worked, actually. I thought that was an option that you had to implement code to basically zero, do what we talked about earlier. If there's some kind of adversarial thing going on in the subnet, the validators can band together and do that. I thought it was just like a hyperparameter or something that you changed on the subnet, but I guess it's not.
No, it's not. And so the validators can choose to do this as either a governance move against the subnet owner, or they can do that in concert with the subnet owner,
Sure.
depending on what the situation is. And so when validators, for those of you who are scanning the discords and the various chats on Twitter and whatnot, you might hear that like, oh, the validators are moving to burn code on a subnet.
Mm.
What that means is the validators are saying, hey, instead of running the subnet owner's code for a subnet, we have our own code that all it does is burn the emissions to UID 0. And we're going to all, as a group of validators, all agree to deploy that same code, and we're going to all burn those emissions. Sometimes the subnet owner will put that into the subnet owner code. So you're like, hey, if it's going to be like a 50% or 30% or whatever burn, then that's what will be done. And if the if subnet validators are running the owner's subnet code, then they will be following that burn effectively. And the key thing here is that because the burn UID is a UID, just like any miner is, it affects consensus. And so if you have one validator who is like, oh, I want to pay those miners more, and it's the same weighting, it's the same ratio between miners, but he just 100% allocates to the miners instead of 50% allocates to the miners, then he'll be out of consensus because all the other validators will be on that same page.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. And to kind of close the loop on this whole thing, that's the 41% that go to miners, the 41% that go to the validators and the stakers. Um, that you really can't mess with, right?
Right now, you can't mess with that. Now, that is something. What's interesting is that the community has talked about this as a potential for like in the future being able to configure that emission split. Right now, it's not configurable, and it's still kind of a question mark of do we really want to mess with that, and who would get to decide what that split should be, and what are the guardrails for that. I mean, right now you have 18% going to the owner, 41% going to the validators, 41% going to the miners. That right now is set in stone and can't be changed. And despite all the conversations we've had, we haven't really moved on making that change. It'd be a really easy change to implement, but the question is, do we want to do that? Like, what are the ripple effects of allowing for that to be customized? I think we'll have some flavoring of that in the future, but I don't know what that's going to look like.
Sure. And then finally on the 18% that the
Mhm.
owners that the subnet owner would get that goes to the owner key, that is configurable, right? You can take that to 0 as the subnet owner or not.
No, the subnet owner gets 18% no matter what. Uh, However, usually the subnet owners are very careful before using any of those funds
Mm.
because a lot of community members interpret uh, the selling down of owner alpha as being a lack of conviction or feeling like you're getting on a lifeboat or something. And so subnet owners usually don't mess with that pool of alpha too often. Sometimes they will for reasons that they can really easily clarify to the community and justify. And I think that's okay. Like, I think the subnet owners should feel at liberty to use alpha for a reason that benefits the subnet. But I think for a long time, there's just been this dogma that, well, if you're a subnet owner and you're selling down your alpha, that must mean you don't believe in it. Therefore, we're going to all panic sell. And that's really not the case most of the time. Like, I'm not going to say, like, never say never in Bittensor, right? There's always somebody. But there's a lot of cases where that's some valuable gunpowder that can be used by the subnet owners. And I think finding creative ways to use that um, is something that subnet owners are exploring right now.
Yeah, if you actually trust the team that you're investing in, then you will also trust in them to utilize the funds at their disposal properly. And if they want to use some of that alpha via a sale, you don't see that as much. You do see more OTC, deals where you have sort of like a direct deal with a larger investor from a subnet owner that would then sort of not really hide, but it sort of obfuscates the reduction in alpha on that key. You can find it, but it doesn't necessarily look like a sell. It just looks like a transfer, and then there's a manual exchange of tau or whatever for the alpha from that subnet owner. So that's why that happens, right? And then that also doesn't affect the tau flow as well, because that's another sort of piece of this, right? From a
Right.
tau flow perspective, just to clarify, none of this burning affects any of that. Tau flow is only looking at buys and sells, right?
Correct. Now, if you're doing the buyback and sell or buyback and burn strategy, then that would affect tau flow, because if a subnet owner were to say, "Hey, I'm going to use the revenue from the subnet to buy alpha and then burn it," then the buying of that alpha would affect tau flow. But in the other
Mm.
cases, no, it does not affect tau flow.
Yeah. Yeah. So tau flow doesn't have tau flow doesn't care about how much alpha is in the subnet. It's purely looking at the amount of tau flowing in, right?
Yeah, it's really just like, what is the amount of tau going in minus the amount of tau going out.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Good. Man, we cleared a lot of stuff up today. This was a very educational session for me.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing a lot of the speaking and walking us through all of that stuff. Anything else we need to know about burns or MEV, or I guess just to reiterate, tau.com app is fully MEV-Shield compliant by default. So you won't, I just looked at it actually, you won't actually see anything different on the app though when you're using it, right?
No, you'll not see anything different. You'll see a little indicator that just tells you that MEVShield is on, but the user experience and the flow for transacting is exactly the same. You've got to do nothing. You got to configure nothing. We are protecting you right off the bat with no additional complexity.
Sweet. Cool.
Awesome, guys. Well, guys, this has been another fantastic episode of The Carrot and the Stick with Garrett Keith. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.